Good morning, everybody. I hope you all slept well. I slept pretty good, although it was a late night last night for me because I was working on a Q thread. You got one live. Hey, awesome. Hey, Jersey. Hey, Texas. What's going on? Kazuko is on here from Japan. Good evening, Kazuko. Glad you could join us. Linda is on Facebook. Lori is on. Pepper is on. New AZ in the house. Right on. San Antonio, Missouri. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to Supernatural Saturday. I am Praying Medic. I'm the author of this book, Hearing God's Voice Made Simple. We're going through this book chapter by chapter, second Saturday of every month at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And we're in chapter 6, Faith and Hearing God's Voice. And we are going to talk a little bit about how faith is instrumental in helping you hear God's voice. So let's get started on that. A lot of people don't believe that God is speaking to them, and they don't believe that they can or will hear God's voice because they have approached this from a perspective that God is not actually interested in talking to them, right? And that comes, for some people, through not so happy childhood experiences where maybe you had a father who never paid attention to you, or a mother who was stoic and didn't really talk to you much, or you might have had a husband or a girlfriend or boyfriend who really didn't pay a lot of attention to you. And you might think, if these people who know me don't feel like I'm worth paying attention to, why would the God of the universe care about me? Programming. We've all been programmed through experiences in our lives. And that programming can lead you to think God isn't actually interested in talking to you. And I'm here to tell you that is not true. That is so not true, I can't even describe it. God has been described by my friend, Northwest Prophetic, as an omniscient insomniac with ADD. He is talking all the time about all kinds of things. He really never stops talking. And the issue that a lot of people have when it comes to hearing God's voice is they don't actually believe that God's talking to them, number one. And number two, if you don't believe God's talking to you, you're not going to tune in and listen, and you're not going to expect that he's actually saying anything, right? So the first thing you have to do is you have to renew your mind to the truth. You have to change your way of thinking. That's what the word repent means. It means change your way of thinking. And you have to believe that God is interested in you. He has something he wants to tell you. He loves you. He cares about you. He has a divine destiny for you. He has a specific purpose as to why he created you. And you have to start believing that he actually loves and cares about you and wants to communicate with you. So they're going to go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. This is from the Message. I don't always quote from the Message, but this is a particularly interesting translation from the Message. By an act of faith, Enoch skipped death completely. They looked all over and couldn't find him because God had taken him. We know on the basis of reliable testimony that before he was taken, he pleased God. It is impossible to please God apart from faith. Why? Because anyone who wants to approach God must both believe that he exists and that he cares enough to respond to those who seek him. All right, so the secret sauce for Enoch walking with God was he believed that God exists, and he believed that God cared about him, and he believed that God wanted to talk to him. And if you look through the scriptures, all the people who walked with God, who had these amazing dreams, prophetic revelations, visions of the end times, visions of dreams of crazy things to come, and the people who were warned about the Messiah's coming through dreams and visions, people who heard God prophetically, they all believed that God existed and believed that he wanted to talk to them. He wanted to communicate a message to them. So that's the first step. The first step is we have to believe that God loves us, cares about us, and wants to communicate with us. That's the first step. Now, I was an atheist until I was 38 years old. Not only did I not believe in God, I pretty much hated Christians. And the reason why I had never heard God's voice was that I didn't believe God existed. I didn't want God to exist. And I sure as heck didn't expect him to speak to me. So he was probably talking to me, but I never tuned in to hear that still small voice. I never really expected a conversation with him. And then one day, everything changed. I had a dramatic experience with God, personal experience. I heard his voice very loudly, very clearly, unmistakably. And I've been hearing his voice ever since then. At times it's a lot more quiet. Most of the time it's just thoughts, thought impressions. But God has been speaking to me for years. And my wake-up call was I had to change my way of thinking, and I had to accept the fact that God exists, he loves me, and he's talking to me, and I had to learn how to hear, perceive, and understand his messages. So once you go to this step where you believe God is speaking, communicating, and you're going to step out in faith and believe that, oh, maybe that dream that I had last night, maybe that was from God. Maybe that vision that I had this morning while I was in bed, maybe that was God giving me some kind of revelation. All right. Once the pump is primed and once you're starting to believe that God is actually communicating to you, then the next step is developing a desire to communicate with God, a desire to hear from him, an intensity, a want to pursue the revelation he wants to give you. So one of the things for me was that when I started having these dreams back in 2008, that the dreams that God gave me where I was praying for people in the ambulance, for example, I had dozens of dreams just about praying for people in ambulances, hospitals, and nursing homes. God was giving me these dreams night after night after night to develop a desire in me to want to receive more from him. He wanted me to develop a hunger for his revelation, for the visions. Sometimes I'd have night visions. I would be laying in bed and at midnight, and I would wake up from a dream and I would be seeing this vision in the middle of the night. And there's visions, and some nights I had 10 visions or dreams throughout the night. It was a crazy time. Like God was developing in me a desire, a passion for receiving his communication. And that is a key thing. It's not just about having faith and believing that God's speaking, but it's how much do you want? How much do you want, right? Because God could open up the fire hose and give you a little drink from it, but it's up to us. The throttle on God's revelation is on our side of the equation. We are the one who limits the amount of revelation we receive from God. It's not God. God does not limit the revelation he gives us. We do. Our desire determines how much revelation we're going to receive from God. It's true. Well, Jesus said in Luke 8 to the disciples, right? He told the disciples asked him why he spoke in parables. And he said, to you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to them it has not been given to them. Why? Because their hearts are darkened and they don't desire to know the truth. So Jesus would go out and he would teach the multitudes, and thousands of people followed him, especially when he was multiplying bread. He had thousands of people following him. And then one day he told them, well, they follow me because of the miracles, because I multiply bread. They don't actually care about learning the mysteries of the kingdom. But his disciples did. And he told the disciples, to you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom. To them it has not, because they don't have a desire. They did not have a sincere desire to learn and understand the mysteries of the kingdom of God. Disciples did, so it was revealed to them supernaturally. Now, and Jesus spoke in parables to reveal truths to those who had ears to hear, conceal truth from those who did not have ears to hear. Desire. Some people do not have the desire to learn the truth. If you don't have the desire, you're not going to learn. God gives us symbolic dreams and visions because they're like parables. You have to seek the matter out. You have to investigate. You have to do some digging, praying. You have to ask God, okay, I had this dream and I saw all this symbolic imagery. What does it mean? Right? God gives you revelation. Many times that revelation is symbolic or parabolic, and he wants to draw you into a conversation where you're asking him, what does this mean? What is the relevance? Why is this relevant? As Q would say. Actually Q is a lot like, Q's presentation of information is a lot like the way God speaks to me. Q gives you clues and hints, and he doesn't come right out and clearly tell you what he wants you to know. He wants you to go and research and dig and find the truth for yourself. God's the same way. God wants you to dig and research and ask him and pursue so that you will understand the truth. But there's a little bit of work involved, and that work comes from whether or not you have desire. You have to desire and want to know the truth. So in one of the parables that Jesus spoke, he talked about 4 different types of soil. Hard soil, upon which the farmer took seed and spread the seed upon 4 different types of soil. Upon the hard soil, the seed could not take root and grow. The birds of the air came and ate it and took it away, and it bore no fruit. Now, people whose hearts do not want to know the truth, who have no desire to know the truth, God gives them revelation. He spreads the seed in the Bible. Seed is a symbolic illustration of the Word of God. So if you have dreams, and in the dreams there's seeds and corn and wheat and things of that nature, that motif tends to represent the Word of God. God spreads the seed, spreads the word, gives it to everyone, and the condition of your heart determines whether or not it's going to bear fruit. So the birds of the air symbolically represent the devil, the evil one, evil spirits, demons, whatever you want to call them, and they come and take away the revelation from God because you don't have a heart that wants to learn and understand the truth. Now the seed fell upon soil that was choked with weeds, and the seed took root and grew, but the weeds choked it out. Now, Jesus said the weeds represent the cares of the world. There's a lot of people who receive revelation from God. They receive the seed takes root, grows, so the person starts to bear fruit, but the cares of the world get involved and distract them from actually bearing fruit. And that's true for people who just would rather play video games all day, would rather watch TV, watch movies, do whatever, be on Netflix all day long, be on social media, and not actually stewarding the revelation God has given them. There are so many things in this world. There are so many distractions, so many things that, and some of them are good. You know, we all have relationships. We have kids, husbands, wives, family members. We have work. We have to take care of our responsibilities. However, we also need to make time to prioritize the things that God wants us to do, that he explains in the Revelation. When God was giving me revelation about writing books, he actually gave my son a dream. I had been talking about writing this book, my first book, for quite a long time, but I was on social media 40, 50 hours a week, and I wasn't spending time writing and editing the book. Month after month after month went by, and I was talking about writing my book, and I wasn't getting any closer to having it written or edited because I was on social media all the time. So one day, my son had a dream, and he comes to me and goes, "Hey, Dad, I had a dream about you last night." And I was like, "Oh, really? What was it?" He said, "Well, I came into your bedroom, and you were holding this book. It was like 1,000 pages. It was this really thick book. You had finally published it." And I said, "Hey, Dad, when did you have time to write that book?" And he said, "You said to me, I got off Facebook." That dream that my son had was a clue from God telling me I need to get off of social media and get that stupid book written. And so I took a break from Facebook. I got off for about 6 months. And lo and behold, I got my first book published. I often have to take breaks from social media when I'm writing a book. I don't have a ghostwriter like a lot of these famous people do who do podcasts and TV shows every day. A lot of them have staff that they have ghostwriters that write the books for them. I don't have a ghostwriter. I write all my own books. And I can either be writing books or I can be on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube doing videos and interacting with people. I can't do both. It doesn't work for me. So I have to prioritize time. I have to take time and set it aside so that I can do the things that God has asked me to do. And God has asked me to write books on a lot of different subjects. And if I don't prioritize the time to do those, I'm never going to bear fruit from the revelation God has given me about my destiny, which is to be a writer. Right? That's just an example. You have to take time and prioritize it to do the things God has shown you. They're not just going to happen. You have to make them happen. All right. And if you do not faithfully steward the revelation that God has given you, you're going to have less of it. I have noticed when God speaks to me through dreams, usually, about a specific subject, if I do not press into and pursue that subject, if I do not take steps to incorporate that revelation into my life, I will get fewer and fewer dreams about that subject until I don't get any about them, and then I'll go on to another subject. So God will speak to me about another subject, and if I take steps on that subject and I incorporate it into my life, into my routine, and I start actually working out the things that he's shown me in the dream, I'll have another dream on that subject. And as I take more steps, I'll have another dream and another dream and another dream and another dream. I've had probably 200 dreams about Q in the last 2 years. Why? Because I have decided that to accept the assignment that God gave me to get involved in Q, to investigate, research, find out what I can about Q, and write some, Twitter threads, do some YouTube videos, and write some books. So as I have taken that revelation and made it a priority and spent the time doing it, God continually gives me more revelation about that subject. But if I stopped doing threads and videos and books on Q and just ignored it, God would then stop giving me revelation about it and give me revelation about something else. At least for me, that's how it works. And in the parable of the talents, that's what Jesus was talking about. He said God gave talents to his servants. To one he gave 5, to one he gave 3, and to another he gave 1 talent, to each according to their, let's see, Bernie Sanders would say, to each according to their need. No, God gave to each according to their ability. God's not a communist. He gave to each according to their ability. And then he asked them to go out and take the talents and put them to use. And when he came back, the one who had 5 doubled it, gave him back to his master. The one who had 2 invested it wisely. The one who had 1 didn't do anything with it. He hid it in the ground. And Jesus said that the master came to the servant and said, the one that you have, I'm taking it from you and giving it to the one who is faithful. So the revelation that God gives you, you need to steward if you don't want it to be taken away from you and given to somebody else. Because if God is calling you to do something, if he is calling you to a specific ministry, if he is giving you gifts and talents, and he's giving you revelation about how to work that out, and you're not obeying it, God's going to take that revelation and give it to someone else, and he'll find someone who will do something with it. So I'm just letting you know, if you don't take the opportunity to make the most of what God gives you, somebody else will. God will find somebody. All right, so what is the key to receiving revelation from God? And let me throw one more thing in there. So years ago, hey Lila, how you doing? Susan's on here. All right. Years ago on Facebook, I had a prophetic thread, which went on for month after month after month after month. We had like probably 20,000 comments on this prophetic thread on Facebook, where people could just show up and ask for a prophetic word from the Lord. And people who were reasonably prophetic would show up, and they would get prophetic words and they would put them on the thread for people who asked. And some people who didn't really understand prophecy, didn't understand how to hear God's voice, they learned how to listen and hear God's voice on this prophetic thread. Over the course of probably a year or so, we trained quite a few people to receive prophetic revelation from God on this prophetic thread. But there was an interesting phenomenon that I noticed that happened on this prophetic thread. No, I'm not going to do it again. It was a nightmare to manage it. And you'll understand why I'm not going to do it again when you hear what I'm about to say. There were a number of people, dozens of people actually, who would show up every day on this thread and ask for a prophetic word, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And that's all they ever did. They asked for a word, and they never gave a word to anyone else. They only showed up every day or twice a day to ask for another prophetic word. Now, I saw this go on over the course of a year and a half that we had this thread going. And I think that's actually a very dangerous precedent, a dangerous thing to do. Because these people who were asking for prophetic words every day, I have reason to believe they weren't doing anything with the revelation God had already given them. So you show up every day and you ask for some instruction from God. He just gave you instruction yesterday. What have you done with that? Oh, nothing. I just want to get another word from God. So you show up today and God gives you another word. What are you going to do with that? Oh, nothing. I just want to get another word. I just like hearing what God has to say. You're not going to do anything with that revelation? No, not going to do anything with it. I just like hearing what God has to say. Well, I am going to warn you about this. Any revelation God gives you, you're responsible for doing something with it. And I'm not trying to be the stern dad, but you are responsible for the revelation God gives you. You're responsible to do something with it. This is not a game. where you just show up and go, oh, I just want to hear what God says, and have no expectation of ever doing anything with it. You have a responsibility to do something with it. So when you ask God for revelation, expect that whatever he tells you, he's going to expect you to act on it, right? Yeah. So just throwing that out there. Be careful what you ask for, because if God gives you revelation, you become responsible for it. So what is the key to receiving consistent revelation from God? The key is persistence. The key is persistence. In, was it Matthew chapter 6 or chapter 7? Luke chapter 11 is the chapter I was thinking of. After Jesus taught his disciples to pray, he taught them how to be persistent. So you pray, you ask God for revelation, and then God expects you to be persistent, right? So the woman who went to court and she harassed the judge, and she asked the judge for something, and the judge would not cave in, and she came back and asked again, and the judge would not cave in, and that woman came back and asked him again, and the judge got so fed up with her persistence, he finally gave her what she asked for. God wants us to be persistent. When I started praying for people to be healed, I had to pray for over 500 people probably over the course of 6 months, and I never saw anybody healed. But I kept coming home at the end of the workday after praying for 4 or 5 people and not seeing anybody healed, and God would give me a dream where I was praying for someone, and in the dream they were healed. So I go back to work, pray for some more people, they wouldn't get healed, come home, God gave me another dream where people were getting healed. So he was being persistent in giving me revelation to encourage me to keep going, keep learning, and I did. If I would have given up after seeing 200 or 300 people healed, I would have never seen anyone healed. But I didn't give up. I kept going. And one day, I was at a grocery store, and I got a word of knowledge. And the woman standing in front of me, I saw her in a vision, and the Lord showed me she had headaches, and I prayed for her. Like that, she was healed. And it's been kind of like that ever since. It took me a while. I prayed for a few more people, and they got healed, and I prayed for a few more people, and they got healed. I prayed for some, and they didn't get healed. But the 0% healing rate went up to about 10%. Then it went up to about 20 and 30 and 40%. Then I hit probably a 70 to 80% success rate with prayer for healing. If you will persist in anything supernatural, whether it is hearing God's voice, interpreting dreams, praying for healing, deliverance, you should be able to hit about a 70 to 80% success rate relatively quickly if you are persistent. I know people who probably have a 90% success rate. Those are really dedicated, hardcore people, and they're very persistent. And of all the people that I know who are successful in any kind of supernatural ministry, whether it's deliverance or healing or healing emotional trauma or whatever, anyone who is successful because they are persistent. If you're not persistent, you're not going to be successful. That's just all there is to it. We have to be persistent, and we have to continually come back and ask God for more revelation. We have to be obedient to what he shows us. Obedience is key. And obedience isn't this obedience like following the law. That's not obedience, at least for me. For me, obedience is God shows me, hey, I want you to write a book on this subject. He gave me a dream 2 months ago, which is going to be a really good idea for a science fiction book or maybe a trilogy. I'm going to pursue that. I'm going to pursue that. I'm going to write that science fiction book. And as I get into writing that science fiction book or series, He is going to give me more revelation as I go. As I start writing the chapters, he's going to give me more revelation about the character development, the plot line, different elements of it. When I'm writing books on Q or writing books on hearing God's voice, he always, as I'm obedient, as I'm doing what he asked me to do, obedience, from my perspective, is simply stepping out in faith and doing what God has shown you that he wants you to do. Whether it's praying for the sick or being a worship leader or ministering to the homeless, whatever it is that God shows you to do, you just need to obey it. Just be obedient. And there is going to be a major blessing in that obedience. Whatever God shows you to do, do it. And you are going to find an incredible blessing in that obedience. You're going to be working out your divine destiny. You're going to be meeting people that God has planned for you to meet. He's going to fund and resource whatever you're doing because you're being obedient. When you obey the revelation of God, the whole of heaven is working with you. If you ever feel like you're paddling upstream, it's probably because you're not obeying the revelation God gave you. When you start to obey the revelation God has given you about your calling, your gifting, your destiny, the people you're supposed to be partnered with, all of heaven works with you. Now, the enemy will work against you, but heaven is working with you when you're walking in the revelation God has given you. And obedience and persistence is the key. You're going to have opposition. When I started praying for people to be set free of demons, I was getting attacked by demons all the time. They'd show up in my dreams. They'd show up in our house. I'd have sudden pain in my leg. I'm like, where the heck did that come from? Oh, it's the spirit of pain. I commanded it to leave and it would go. I was getting attacked by demons all the time. And that'll happen. When you start to step out in the supernatural, you're going to be attacked by the enemy. I guarantee it. You just got to deal with it and realize, oh, you obviously don't want me to walk out my destiny. You don't want me to obey the revelation God gave me. So screw you. I'm going to do it anyway. Demon, get out of here. You have to push back against the kingdom of darkness. The kingdom of darkness will definitely oppose anything you want to do that is in your scroll of life, in your divine destiny. Alrighty. Oh, look, Ron Paul is on here. Sue Beckman. That's right, Sue. Never give up. Sue is one of our my intercessor friends. And sometimes you'll be attacked by other believers just for doing what God has shown you to do. But you know what? It has kind of become my life verse. I had a series of experiences back in 2000. It might have been 2009 or 2010, where I kept waking up in the morning at 4:20. I'd just wake up and look at the clock. Boom, it's 4:20. I woke up the next morning, looked at the clock, 4:20. Woke up the third day, looked at the clock, it's 4:20. I'm like, okay, Lord, I know you're trying to send me a message. What's the message? And at that time, I was struggling with the issue of pride and obedience, and whether the testimonies I was sharing about praying for people to be healed, if that was really about me trying to build up my own reputation, build up my own standing on social media, or if it was me just obeying what God asked me to do. So I had these experiences where I woke up at 4:20 every morning. And I was like, okay, I need to go through the Bible and find the verse. And I got to Acts 4:20. When Peter and the disciples were being threatened with punishment, Peter said, whether it is right to obey God or man, you decide. As for us, we must obey God. For we cannot but testify of the things that we have seen and heard. And God was telling me that I needed to be obedient and I needed to testify about the things that God was doing in my life. That was, for me, that was obedience. It was testifying about what God had done. And I've never looked back. my articles, my videos are all about testifying about the things that God has done through me, so that other people can believe that God will do the same things through them. So yes, you will be opposed by people, but that's okay. It is way better to obey God than man. All right, that is my message for today. If you have any questions real quick, I'll see if I can answer them, but my voice is getting a little sore. Kim Clement said no impeachment, so what's my take? Q also said no impeachment. When Q said president will not be impeached, fact, I think what he meant was Trump is not going to be removed from the office of the president by impeachment. You can't stop the House from impeaching him, but obviously he isn't going to be removed from office. So you have to, when you hear about things like people saying no impeachment, you need to put it in context. What exactly is a revelation? A revelation is a conversation. If I write you a text message, that's a revelation. If I write you an email, I'm revealing something to you. When I say revelation, I'm talking about God communicating to us, right? Talking to us. And the way God communicates is very different. Some people, it's dreams, visions, the still small voice. Sometimes God speaks through the circumstances of your life. Sometimes he'll speak through a word of knowledge or a prophetic word from somebody else. So that's when I say revelation, I just mean God is revealing something that you didn't know. He's communicating to you. Someone asked a question, how do you get away from the mindset of believing that God won't give you visions because he wants you to remain humble? God is not going to throttle down the revelation, the visions, the dreams that he gives you because you're having a problem with humility. If you're having a problem with humility, that is on your end of the equation, and you need to learn to become humble. God isn't going to not give you revelation because he's afraid that you won't be able to deal with your ego. That is just something you need to work out. God gives revelation to everyone, and how you deal with it is your own issue. Humility is a major blessing if you can learn to walk in humility. How do you know if God is shutting the door when you step out or the enemy is opposing you? By the fruit. I always judge revelation from God by the fruit that it bears. So if God gives me, if God closes a door, if it appears to me as if God is shutting something down, telling me don't do this or whatever, or he is suggesting that I should move into a situation where I might be working with a new group of people, I'm always going to judge whether or not that was the Lord by the fruit that it bears. If it bears good fruit, it was of the Lord. If it bears bad fruit, it probably wasn't the Lord. By their fruits you shall know them. It's a good way to discern the spirit that's on people operating through people is the fruit that comes from their ministry, and same with revelation from God. Just judge the fruit. How do you know a vision is not just your own thoughts and imagination? That is a really good question. So, seeing in the Spirit made simple. All right. In this book, Hearing God's Voice Made Simple, I cover a little bit about how to confirm whether the revelation you got received from God is from God, from you, from a demon, from some other source. Specifically related to visions and dreams, there's an entire chapter or two in the Seeing in the Spirit book on how to discern whether a vision is from God, from your soul, from some other source. Again, part of it comes down to judging the fruit. If it bears good fruit, it's probably of God. If it bears bad fruit, it's probably not of God. That's the big biggie. There are other ways. You can check out the book Seeing in the Spirit, and I will discuss that in a future broadcast on how to discern the origin of revelation. Greg Harvey's on here. What's up, brother? Good to see you, Greg. Glad you could join the broadcast. Why does God allow the devil to live in the White House? Because God may be in control, but he left us in charge. The heaven of the heavens belong to the Lord, but the affairs of the earth he has given to the sons of men. So a lot of people think that God is down here on earth controlling everything that we do. That God, some people kind of take the view that we're basically puppets, that God is controlling all of us and making us do everything. And if somebody gets into the White House who is a bad person, that God like made that happen. No, God didn't make that happen. God gives us free will, and we choose to elect the leaders that we want to elect. So if somebody bad ends up in the White House, it's on us. It's not on God. Now, God will work through that situation and bring about the best circumstances that he can from our bad choices. But it's on us when somebody bad ends up in the White House. Linda, how do I pray to keep people from traveling in the spirit and entering my home? All righty, here you go. I have had that happen sometimes. And here's one strategy. Realize that God has given us all angels, all of us. We all have angels surrounding us. We have a personal angel or two. And some people have specific angels for other things, angels related to their ministry. So if you're a writer, you may have an angel who follows you around, who gives you revelation from heaven about things that you're writing. That angel may work in the earth realm to get your writing out there, get your message out there, and help you succeed in your writing. But whatever it is that you're doing, whatever your calling, your gifting, your destiny is, God has angels that help you accomplish that goal. I've got healing angels. I know it. People have seen them when I'm praying for people. Sometimes others will say, wow, you got a big freaking angel standing behind you. I'm like, probably a healing angel. So one thing that you might want to do is tell or ask your angels to surround your house, to stand guard, and not let those idiotic people astral project into your bedroom at night while you're sleeping. It is a strategy I have used, and it works for me. There are other things you can do, but that's one that I can talk about openly. I do not recommend astral projection. I think traveling the spirit is awesome. I think astral projection is a different process, and I do not recommend it. If you want more information on astral projection versus Christian travel in the spirit, traveling in the spirit made simple. How do you address recurring nightmares? All right. So if you have a recurring dream, nightmare, night terror dream, there's a message in there, and God is probably trying to get your attention. Now, for some people, these recurring nightmares, night terrors are actually from a demonic source. And at some point, you're going to need to learn how to exercise authority over demons. Matthew 17. All right. The disciples could not cast a demon out of this kid, and Jesus rebuked the disciples and cast out the demon. And it's a matter of learning to exercise authority over demonic beings. Now, I used to have a lot of, not a lot, I had a fair number of demonic dreams years ago. I don't have many more because I told those stupid demons to get the hell out of my house. Don't come in my room. I'm not going to receive your revelation. You're not going to terrify me. I'm not obeying. I'm not paying attention to it. I rarely do I have dreams anymore that are dark, foreboding, scary, frightening, terrifying anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. And that's because I learned to walk in my authority, the authority that God has given all of us. You have to learn how to exercise that authority. So that's one thing. Another thing is, if those dreams or nightmares are from God, and they could be, If God is sending you a message, and you need to start communicating with God and ask him, what message are you sending me? What am I not getting? Look, I have a recurring set of dreams that God's been giving me. They're not nightmares. They're not pleasant, but they're not nightmares. But God has been telling me through these dreams that I need to go back through my past and do some emotional healing from some trauma that I suffered at a particular period of my life I haven't dealt with yet. So many times, especially if the nightmare or the recurring dream references a point in your past, you probably need to go back to that point in your past and deal with the emotional trauma that happened at that time. That may be what God is getting around to. He may be trying to send you a message. You need to ask him, look, what are you telling me? I don't get this. Please explain. Give me more information. Yeah, if you stand up to demons enough persistently and just rebuke those stupid demons and tell them to get out of your house, get out of your life, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep standing up, keep pushing back. The more you push back against demonic dreams and visions and attacks, the less they will happen. What does the Bible say? Resist the devil and he will flee. Well, sometimes it takes resisting more than just one time. My books can be found virtually anywhere. They're in Barnes & Noble, they're in bookstores. You can order them. They're also available on Amazon. Just look for any books by Praying Medic. Have I had any dreams about the rapture and the coming of Jesus? No, I haven't. The dreams that God gives me about the future are actually quite optimistic. I see a lot of very good things happening in the next 20 years based on what God has shown me. I think Trump's presidency should cause a lot of people to go back and reread their Bibles and maybe reinterpret their understanding of the book of Revelation and other prophetic books based on what Trump is doing to the New World Order. Because a lot of the interpretations of the book of Revelation and prophetic passages, those interpretations were provided by people who were living in a time when they saw increasing war and suffering. They saw wars in Europe in the 19th century. They saw World War I, World War II, develop of the nuclear bomb, and a lot of theology and a lot of eschatology, views of the end times, the future, were based off the assumption that, okay, well, we're in the last days. We're going to eventually end up destroying this planet, and then Jesus is going to return, and we're going to have the new kingdom, the new heaven, new earth, and that's it, right? Well, that's one possibility, but the rise of the New World Order over the last 100 years suddenly came to a screeching halt. And the New World Order is being destroyed as we sit here and talk. And nobody saw Trump's presidency. The people who control, the puppet masters at the very top of the pyramid who control politicians, did not see this coming 10 years ago. And I think Trump's presidency should cause people to go back to their Bibles and look at things again and see if there's another way of viewing it. Have I had dreams for cures coming soon? Lisa, yes, I have. Over the last 10 years, I've had a number of dreams suggesting that not only is supernatural healing going to increase, but so are cures for diseases. Both. I think we're going to see a time here on Earth in the next 20 years where there will be very, very few diseases of any kind. I think there are already a lot of cures, and I think they're going to be released relatively quickly. What about psychological diseases? God's been showing me a lot about healing mental illness, healing PTSD, depression, things of that nature. Had a lot of success, and most of that is tied to emotional healing emotional trauma. Emotional trauma is the root of I would not say all, but I would say a lot of mental illness. And it's also the root cause of a lot of physical symptoms, chronic pain, for one. I do not care about the coronavirus. It's not a thing for me. It's the cold and flu season. We have flu viruses that come around every year. Some years are worse than others. I know the media is making a huge hysterical thing about the coronavirus. I know a lot of people in the truther community have a big, huge thing about the coronavirus. God has not put that on my radar. I'm not studying it. I'm not researching it. I try really hard to focus only on what God is putting on my radar, and He has not put the coronavirus on my radar. So I know a lot of people, other people are interested in it. It doesn't interest me. God can heal you instantly. Yes. Can you receive His healing instantly? That's the question. I think that's going to do it. I'm going to go. You got my tea ready? Thanks. I have to do a broadcast for the current Q thread I did on Twitter. Yeah, it was this was a very good broadcast. I'm really glad I got to hang out with everybody and chat. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you for joining me on Supernatural Saturday. I'll catch you on the next broadcast.